Hello, Tim here. Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to finish up the tool chest and the little toy tools that we made past couple episodes. And I got all the tools that I made are already sanded except for the saw. So I'm going to go through the steps of what I've done to finish that up. The sanding is always kind of the painstaking part, and depending on how you want things to look, you can always sand more and more, but I know that these things over time will get played with, which is what their intention is, so I don't worry too much about every little area being sanded out. It's not like fine furniture. Before we get to the sanding, you might want to watch the two previous videos so you can see the step-by-step of what I've come to this point. So I'd recommend watching those first, and that's on building the toolbox here and then how I made these tools. I'm just going to go through the steps of what I've done so far, and I got a couple of pencil marks here to sand out. I cut this hole here last time, and then I actually used a little router bit to do that interior round over. But the rest of it is all done by sanding and a little bit whittling right here to get that edge broken over. So I'm going to do a little bit of sanding, and what I start with, what I like, this is just pressure PSA 100 grit. I use the process I'm going to use is called step sanding. So I'm starting with 100 grit. Then this is cloth back stuff that I use for the lathe work. This is 120 grit, and then I'll finish at 150 grit. But I like this stuff because I can fold it over and it's stuck. So it's a little bit rigid, but still flexible. And I'm rounding the back of the saw here. Now I'm just going to blunt these teeth edges here so that they're not very sharp. Now there's a couple of little tools here that I find very useful. They're band sanders, and they come with a little strip of sandpaper. This one's a 1/2 inch. You just put the fresh one on, and you can keep turning it to a fresh side. This one's a 1/4 inch one, and these will allow me to get in here like this here. So we're just eliminating any chance of there being a sliver or anything that would catch on any fabric or something like that. All right, so that's good. Now I'm going to step sand this to 120 grit. And like I said, these other tools, I've already been through all this. And in the process of doing this, I started wetted down the wood with water, which raises the grain. And then that allows me to sand those fibers down, and you get a better finish that way. And as much as possible, I try to sand with the grain and eliminate having cross sanding marks in it. 120 grit is your workhorse sandpaper. 100 grit is a little more aggressive, and it can leave sanding marks in it. It's just that because it's more aggressive, you can get a lot of sanding done quicker, but final sanding takes a little bit more to get the scratches out. But this is kind of the painstaking part of doing this whole thing. So if you can enjoy sanding, you'll love woodworking. Some people I know don't like the sound of sanding, and they plug their ears. Right?
I can't hear you.
This is 150 grit, and I like this stuff here. This is J-weight from Klingspor. This is where I get this stuff. This is from Klingspor as well, and this is a little more aggressive grit. I don't know the garnet. I don't know what the difference as far as the quality. So here I'm going with 150 grit. kind of hitting those teeth a little bit. I'm not going to do too much more on that. And here's where the detail sander comes in really handy here. So I can get this inside here and here. And actually I use this one for inside here. So this will get you into the corners. So that's what this really is good for. Get the inside here. And our whole goal is not just to make it look nice and pretty, but the whole goal is to make sure that what we're doing is all safe. And I think we're pretty good. Like I said before we started this session here, I did a lot of the sanding, so it's pretty much all done. So I'm just gonna brush off the dust. The finish I'm going to use on here is pretty much like what I guess you'd call French polish, but it's not going to be that sophisticated. This is shellac, and this is food safe. The shellac is going to give us a little more sheen, and it can be added to later. You can always touch it up. This is Zinsser traditional shellac. You want to be careful with what kind of finishes you put on toys in case kids put it in their mouth. Shellac is it's pretty safe, and this product here is called Tried and True Oil. It's just in the bottle here because it comes in a can like this. And Tried and True Oil is got no heavy metals in it like linseed oil does. It's got, I think there's cadmium in it to dry it. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to put oil in here, and probably, I don't know how much I'm going to use here, but probably about a ½ inch on the bottom there. And then I'm going to put the shellac in here too. I don't necessarily have a formula, but I want it a little thinner. And this is denatured alcohol in this thing here, so I'm going to thin this down a little bit. This is going to be kind of a wash coat. There is a book I'd recommend. Actually, I got it right here, that explains a lot of the wood finishing. This is my go-to book for understanding how to select, and he answers a lot of questions about what types of finishes you want to use on your furniture and things you're making. Let's start with the toolbox, and I'm going to start with the bottom, and we're not staining it, we're just doing natural color. So we got oil on here. I'm going to see how this works here. It's kind of rubbed on. It's the nature of French polish finishes. And the oil, while I'm using it, I put it on the rag here, and that keeps it from sticking. So the oil and the shellac fuse together. But it's going to have just a slight sheen to it, which is what I want. It'll look kind of oil finish, but just a little bit more closed pore than oil. Oil would, the more you handle it, the oils from your skin get on there and it gets kind of dirty. So I'm going to go to the inside. The inside's not going to be as rubbed out as the outside because I can't get in there real easy. The kind of brush, you can't use a foam brush because that would just dissolve with the solvent, the shellac. But this is just a cheap brush, and the reason I'm using a cheap brush is just to transfer the finish to the wood. And the brush, in a sense, if you want to look at it this way, the brush is actually the rag itself. So you could dip the rag in the shellac, but I use the brush here just to transfer. So it doesn't. The type of brush is not that critical. So I put a little oil on here, and then I'm going to rub this down. When you're doing this kind of finish, I'm told, you have to press down fairly hard, and the friction is what does the fusing of the two materials. So let's say you didn't want it natural wood. I'm going natural look here. Let's say you wanted to stain it or have it colored darker. Then you would do that first, and you could use almost any stain, oil base or anything like that, a water base, but that has to be thoroughly dry if it's oil before you come to the shellac. And we'll do another coat of this once this dries a little bit after we do the other tools. The advantage of shellac is it adheres to everything, and a lot of times shellac is used over something that has smoke damage because it'll seal it in. So you can use shellac on top of any finish. So I'm just saw some glue here that started to bother me. I didn't think it would, but it kind of does, so I'm just gonna deal with it now. Pretend that I'm working for a fussy customer. In this case, the customer doesn't know he's getting it.
He is fussy though.
Yeah, he is fussy for other reasons. So I really like how this looks on white oak. That's what the handle is. It's white oak. Oh, I'm liking this now. Okay, I'm gonna set this aside so it can dry. And we're gonna go next to the hammer. Pre-oil this here. You can just see how this cherry just really sets that off. I just love mixing that wood. Cherry is one of my favorite woods. It's just not a very good wood for carving. I mean, it can carve okay. It's just dulls your tools up. And the reason why you see light and then dark is that you're looking at the end grain here and with the grain there, and the end grain here and with the grain there, so it'll show up like that because of that, which is kind of a cool feature. Adds a little interest, but it adds strength, and that's why we did it that way. It really polishes up when you add friction. Now I can feel the shellac getting a little sticky, so I'm going to put a little more oil on here. Okay, I'll leave that aside for now. We'll come back to it later with another coat. Do the tri-square. Let's do the saw here. I'm going to put a little more alcohol in here to thin it out. From the can, it's pretty thick, but it's an older can, so it probably has evaporated and gotten a little thicker. Yeah, it's a little better. The more you kind of work with this stuff, the more you get kind of used to it and how it behaves. That's the saw. Now let's do the chisel or the screwdriver. Let's do the screwdriver. And then the wrench. Okay, we'll let that dry. There's the first coat, and I'm going to do the second coat off camera. but that's going to be pretty much the same. And then we'll wrap it up. All right, we got the second coat on here and it's dry. I wiped it down. I'm going to put a little beeswax on here, and what this is in this little container here is beeswax that's been cut with Gamasol. Gamasol is like paint thinner, and I wrote it on the top here, Gamasol. So Gamasol's doesn't have the odor, and that's artists use this stuff, so you can get it at art supply places and that. So you need to cut the beeswax down. So this is essentially a wax and oil finish, and this puts a nice soft sheen on it. So I'm gonna rub it, not on the inside so much, but just on the outside. And I really like how this has a nice patina to it. It's just kind of a soft glow. Fairly easy to put on. And the advantage of this kind of thing is that you can always add more later if it gets scuffed up. But again, you got to remember it's a toolbox and it's a toy. And I don't know, for me, it's just the satisfaction of putting a finish on something and it kind of completes everything. So you can eliminate this step if you don't want to. There's other finishes you could put on here, like a varnish, polyurethane, but I don't like the high buildup. This is more of a soft sheen. Okay, let me just do a final little buff here. All right, here we are, all done. Even though my grandson's a little too young to play with this now, I think he'll like it in time. So that's it. I got a little beeswax polish on all this. It was a lot of fun, and it's the end of a 3-part series, starting with the toolbox. So here we got 5 pieces, and there's still room for cookies and M&Ms or whatever else he's going to put in here. So we got it all fit, and there it is. So thanks for watching, and please subscribe, give a thumbs up if you would, and we'll see you next time. Oh, I got a little glue right there. See that? But you know what? That's part of the project here. I'm just gonna leave it. I can take that out some other time if I decide it bothers me too much, but right now, actually it does bother me too much.